All righty, let's get started. Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a great day. My name is Kevin Marcus Miller. I'm on the marketing team here at Seclor. Welcome to today's webinar. Starting the year off strong, we're going with a good topic. I hope many of you are excited for 2025 data security forecast. So, what trends can we look out for and prepare for as we move throughout this new year? A few details before we get started. Today's webinar, of course, will be recorded. We'll go ahead and send that out within 48 hours to your email that you registered with. Feel free to also use the chat or the Q&A option if you have questions. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the session, but sometimes we'll have a little bit of time and be able to answer questions throughout as well. Alrighty, so I'd like to go ahead and introduce our esteemed panelists for today. First up is Ramin Farasat. He is our CPO here at Seclor. And then also my friend Sherry Yavalak, who is our senior sales engineer here at Seclor. I'll go and hand it over to you, Ramin.
Thank you, Kevin. And I appreciate all of you for joining this webinar. I'm really excited to go through a number of different topics today that I hope are important to you as much as they are to us. One of the first topics that we're going to be talking about is security for Gen AI. I speak to a lot of our customers, and almost in every conversation, this comes up as an area that they're very concerned about. And I'll be touching on what we see happening going forward, not just what has been happening with Gen AI, Kevin, but also what's going to be happening going forward. We're going to jump into what's happening from a geopolitical cyber risk perspective. And then after that, rising global cybercrime threats, and then quantum computing. A lot of talks around quantum computing, the risks around quantum computing, and what's happening there. And finally, if the time permits, we want to end with what we're calling fourth-party risk awareness, and what are the things to prepare there. So that's the topics that we're going to be going over today, Kevin.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and kick it off. So let's talk about Gen AI. I know a lot of you have different opinions about this, and I see Sherry over there smiling because this is definitely a controversial topic. So I have my own thoughts, but I'm more interested in both of you. What do you have to say about how did we get here when it comes to Gen AI, and what is the future looking like when it comes to data security and Gen AI? Ramin, over to you.
Sure. So obviously, one of the top topics that comes up in discussions with customers, and there was a recent report that came up from Splunk that said more than 36% of CISO's main concern is AI-powered attacks. And I wanted to touch on that and talk about what to look forward to, unfortunately, going forward with what's happening with Gen AI. All the old security challenges like phishing attacks, insider threats, ransomware, they're going to be there, and they're going to continue to be there, but they're going to become much more sophisticated. We're going to see more sophisticated phishing emails. We're going to be seeing deep fakes. We're going to be seeing vishing. Vishing is voice phishing, and more. And we believe that in the coming year, AI is also going to be used to very rapidly create various different versions of malwares that could potentially be hyper-personalized for phishing attacks and potentially accelerate vulnerability discovery. This is something that we're concerned about from the perspective of how AI could be used for really improving the ways that the bad actors attack our solutions. New models that are capable of analyzing massive amount of both public and stolen data are going to be used to create tailor-made ransomware. So why would they want to be doing that? Is they want to be able to match the victim's situation and request perfect ransom amount, which is quite scary. We believe that AI-driven ransomware could automate attacking steps. They could potentially support dynamic decision-making. So as you can imagine, the attacks are going to become a lot more sophisticated, and they could potentially identify the most critical systems that they could target. They could also do things like adjusting the encryption speeds, adjust the scope in real time, and basically optimize their attack so that they can get maximum success. Gen AI's search capabilities could potentially be used to be able to surface 0 days and also unknown common vulnerabilities and exposures that today haven't been patched yet. And that's from the perspective of how they could really use Gen AI to be able to really improve the ways that they attack us, but also the models themselves could be threatened as well. They could be using the models in the way of creating malicious prompt injections. The bad actors can do malicious prompt injection so that they can go in and potentially attack the LLMs and steal data. Attackers can also reverse engineer the prompts. They can observe how the models behave, and based on the responses that they get, they can interact with the model and be able to potentially extract different data from the models. Now that more and more companies are implementing various different Gen AI solutions within their network, one of the things that we're concerned about is also that the private data could be used to deliberately manipulate the results of what the Gen AI is responding to. They could potentially use data sources such as emails and documents to confuse the AI or make it do something harmful. Finally, multimodal AI. This is basically AI that could use multiple different types of data. This could be text, images, audio, and video. Multimodal AI could be used to create attack chains that can automate the entire pipeline of a cyber attack. So Gen AI itself can now be used by less experienced bad actors. Before, we had the attackers had to be very experienced to be able to attack us, but now they could potentially use Gen AI, even if they're less experienced, to launch very advanced attacks with minimal human interaction. So all of that stuff said, from the perspective of a security vendor, we're hoping that that the defenders, the cybersecurity professionals, they would use AI-based discovery to be able to know where their sensitive content is, so they know who has access to that content, that they leverage threat detection systems and analyze the data sets so that they can identify anomalies in real time and provide predictive threat intelligence.
What are you seeing, Ramin, when it comes to ChatGPT specifically in regards to data security? Have you been seeing some updates and some some moving action, or what's top of mind, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, great question. One of the main ways that people use not just ChatGPT, but many of the different AI applications that they have in their networks is copy and paste. That's the simplest way to be able to take some information, potentially bring it into their application so they can do various different things. And of course, this is not a malicious behavior by the user. This is because they want to get their job done easier and faster. What we have seen is that many times they copy a specific portion of a document that could have sensitive information within it and bring it into their AI prompt. What we have built as part of our solution, and this is something that has been available from Seclor for quite a while, is the ability to be able to disable the ability to do copy and paste. And of course, if the data has been gone through Seclor and has been DRM'd by Seclor, while it's at rest, it's not going to be able to go through the LLMs.
Absolutely. Let's move through to our next topic that we have here. Ramin, one of the things that's kind of been difficult for folks to navigate has, people usually say don't talk about politics at work, right? But when we talk about geopolitical cyber regulations, this affects everyone. This is not just who do you like or what's going on in the world. This is everyday data security regulations that affect you and I in our job. Walk me through how we got where we're at right now and what's really evolving and moving as we move through 2025.
Yeah, I think more and more is changing from the perspective of both preparation for dealing with geopolitical cyber regulations, but also how we look at what is happening around the world. IP or intellectual property theft and cyber espionage are obviously increasing. There's a lot of concerns around this by a lot of our larger customers, especially for those that are in specific areas, emerging technologies, things like AI, biotech, quantum computing. There's a lot of concerns around theft of intellectual properties in those type of technologies. Also, cyber espionage and loss of sensitive information has resulted in various different global conflicts, and it's a major concern for a lot of CEOs in these large corporations. The tensions has caused a lot of the customers now to modify potentially their insurance policies, change their vendors, in some cases, their trading policies. And some of our customers are also telling us that they have had to stop doing business in certain countries altogether. So So this is something that is really escalated, and there's probably going to be more targeted attacks on research institutions, tech companies, and critical infrastructures, and we expect that to continue this year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When it comes to Secure and the regulations that we help companies protect against the most, what are you seeing as top of mind for our customers when it comes to the political scam?
Every country has come up with various different compliances that are expecting the companies to adhere to. And one of the biggest focuses that we have at Seclor using our technologies to help our customers meet those compliance requirements. And those compliance requirements expect the customers to know again where their content is, where their sensitive content is, to be able to tag the content for that sensitivity information, and then in addition to that, make sure that that content remains secure and can only be accessed by certain people who should have access to that content. And then finally, be able to do reporting around the risks, around where the content is, and around who has access to that content. And those are the areas that Seclor is really positioned well to help the customers meet those compliance requirements. And the compliances are different depending on where you are in the world and what the requirements are.
In the chat, do me a favor, folks, as you're tuned in, let me know where you're dialing in from. This is very specific to what region, right? So, if we need to go through in the Q&A section and talk about India or the United States, I'm just curious. Let me know in the chat where you're dialing in from, and we can make sure to take a look at that further as well.
And let
So,
me ask Sherry, what you're seeing from the customer perspective, from a geopolitical cyber regulation, since you're dealing with a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I apologize, my video went purple and then went out. So I don't have video on the call. However, I am very, very engaged in the conversation and appreciate the opportunity to participate with everyone today as well. So yes, out in the field, what I'm noticing is there are usually kind of two main drivers that we're seeing where folks are interested in looking at, technologies that are going to bring security closer to the data, which is really what we're talking about, which is that, data-centric security model in part. The big drivers would be compliance is definitely top of mind. And the next one is going to be intellectual property protection. So those are really the big reasons. Compliance is going to drive a lot of the, financial services, a lot of the folks, these types of areas that we know are dealing with personally identifiable information. So I think when it comes to data security, we're doing a very good job from an awareness perspective of letting folks know in these environments, hey, if you're handling data that's PII, that's got, two pieces together make PII, one piece by itself may not. We're doing a lot of work in the industry to educate user populations on handling of sensitive information. And so anyone who's dealing with, credit card information, who's dealing with customer account information, who's dealing with, member information, whatever it might be, is handling PII. So when you talk about regulations, first we were seeing this a lot with GDPR, right, out of Germany and Europe. So you'd see a lot of drivers for that. If you're doing business in these areas, you have a responsibility to not only handle it correctly, but to know where it's going and be able to revoke or opt out or do those types of things with people's data. So that has only exploded, as we all know, in this industry. So we now see, various countries, various states, as you mentioned, Ramin, we see all of these regulations coming out. So I think there's a lot of anxiety often about, we know we're supposed to be doing certain things with this data, but we're not sure the best way to do it. And when it comes to protecting the sensitive information, you're dealing with encryption as part of that protection. And when you're dealing with encryption, you're tied to whatever solution that you're choosing for your data, right? Because that data is going to be encrypted with proprietary keys. So there's another fear element that comes in from the customer side, which is, well, that looks great today, but how do I know what's going to be needed in 3 years and 5 years and in 10 years? And this data's got a retention requirement of, 10 years or whatever it may be. So we see a lot of concern and looking to us to assist with guidance, us as security professionals, not
right.
just at support, right, in the industry. We are here to help each other. So one thing I do like to tell folks, just a little tip if anyone isn't doing this already, be involved with your industry professional organizations. Be involved with your local groups for things like cybersecurity, whether that's specific to a vertical like semiconductors or financial services or insurance or whatever it might be, manufacturing, whatever it is. Find that community either in person or online so you have these resources, because I really think that's how we as an industry and a group are going to make the best headway toward getting that closer to protection of the data itself that has that sensitive information. So definitely appreciate the opportunity to speak to it, but I would say I definitely see a lot in the field of that anxiety and fear around, I'm supposed to be doing this, I don't know how to do it, and I can't make a quick decision about which tool to use because I'm going to be tied to it for a while. So there are large implications financially of not protecting it. But once we do invest in a solution, what happens if our tech stack has to change in 3 years? How do we decrypt everything and re-encrypt it with the next solution? So, Seclor is in a very unique position to be able to address those concerns, particularly because we are not tied to other solutions. So we can pivot when with that. But you want to look for a tool, whether it's Seclor or something else out there, whatever part of your tech stack you're trying to solve, you want to make sure you're looking for a tool where you've got a lifelong partnership with that vendor. So they're going to pivot with you as well. That's the biggest thing. And then, of course, the intellectual property protection is what I had mentioned as that other driver. Now we're thinking about things like semiconductors is a great example. The semiconductor industry is going to have less, they still have PII, I'm sure, as part of customers and all of these things, but really their crown jewels are going to be things like chip designs, masking for these chips to be made, things like that. So those are usually the big drivers. And I will say there's pressure for intellectual property protection because of a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, for example. You have a lot of reasons that IP needs to be protected. And again, similar challenge where I know I need to protect it. I know we can't have exceptions of people that get access to this when it's not protected. So how do we go about doing this? And it's great to have companies like Seclor out there that can help and work with your partners, work with your other vendors as well to help you come up with a comprehensive solution that will work for you down the road. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Great insight. I love the insight about joining different organizations and staying up to date. I feel a lot of folks forget that cybersecurity is not just about who knows which regulations at a particular point. It's more so about how are we educating and uplifting others as we all continue to learn and evolve, right? And that's what makes a great leader. So, as you're helping and educating folks, I see so many folks here in the chat, Egypt, Silicon Valley, different locations. These regulations are only going to get more complex, right, over time. And so it's really imperative that we continue to educate and uplift each other. Let's talk about cybercrime for a second. So a lot of folks read a headline and they see a data breach and the first thought is the absolute worst, right? It's like, what happened? Oh my goodness. And let's be honest, there was a lot going on last year, a lot of different breaches. So I'm actually really curious to hear how much of that should we be worried about as we move throughout this new year? How much of it was just daily fear-mongering news? What do we need to be concerned about truthfully, Ramin, as practitioners?
Yeah, good question, Kevin. The end goal for majority of the cyber criminals is still the same, right? It's financial gain. And the thing that is different is that the way that they're conducting their attacks is changing, and it's really evolving very, very rapidly. And rather than the attacks, I want to start with simple things like phishing attacks that we're seeing. In my personal emails, I get a lot of phishing emails.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, just even in the last few months, the type of emails that I'm receiving are becoming more and more sophisticated. The methods that they're using to basically entice the victim to download the malware or issue a payment, or or to potentially put a bogus supplier in front of you is really evolving and changing. And this is something that we really need to be aware of and really need to be careful about. The other thing that's really taken off and has really gotten much worse than it used to be is insider threats. They're becoming a lot more common, and organizations are really struggling to be able to detect, even though they have a lot of different AI and analytics tools to know who is actually is attacking them. It's becoming a lot harder to be able to deal with insider threats. One of the things that we have seen is that, at least in the last few months, we've seen sophisticated operatives that basically bypass background checks, and they have stolen credentials and fake LinkedIn profiles, and they basically become employees of companies. And in fact, FBI confirmed that 300 companies unknowingly hired 60 imposters as employees in just the last few months. So
Unreal.
isn't that crazy? So traditional background checks are really no longer sufficient, and insider threat becomes a much bigger issue. And that's just from the perspective of insider threats. But we touched on ransomware in the previous topics. But we believe that in 2025, ransomware is going to continue to rise.
Right.
And a lot of this is based on the use of unmanaged applications and devices. People that are basically using their own machines, they're using their own devices and their own applications that they're bringing in. And it's not because they're trying to be malicious, but it's because they want to be more productive. And employees today are basically using their devices and their preferred apps that potentially include different AI solutions and services, and that potentially introduce a whole new layer of shadow IT, which is a bigger risk that IT departments have to deal with. And then, of course, cloud intrusions has also increased by 75% over the last year. Something that basically really forces us not to just be conscious about our third-party clouds that we use, but really have full visibility and control across our public, our private clouds, as well as every of our on-prem servers as much as possible.
Sherry,
talk to me. What are you seeing out in the field?
Yeah, ransomware is definitely a top of mind one, and the more elegant phishing attacks that we're seeing. I mean, we all know the typical trainings where it's like, hey, if you see hello blank blank blank, and the formats are wrong. And to Ramin's point earlier about the fears and the what to look for with AI incorporated into this, is that's really not easy to identify anymore. We no longer see as many spelling or grammatic errors, things like that that jump out at us in those. So I think that's one, is just luckily, I would say we're offsetting that by having the awareness training with the user population. So the more we hear about these breaches, the more we hear about these ransomware attacks and phishing attacks, people see it in the news, it's top of mind more. So that's going to lessen the effectiveness of those types of campaigns. For ransomware, I'll say that has been a really fun one to talk about in the field, because with ransomware, a lot of times you'll have folks that maybe are new to the industry that are saying, how can we prevent this? How can we stop this from happening, right? Wouldn't that be great if there was a product out there? But as anyone that's been in the industry understands, defense in depth is a thing for a reason. So you have to do security with layers, because there isn't going to be one end-all solution that's going to stop anyone from getting into your environment, unfortunately. That would be a very successful company and product if there were. But since that's not the case, what we talk about, at least when we're talking with folks, is minimizing the impact. If someone is going to be environment, which a lot of times we don't know when someone's in our environment, it can be years. I mean, things can stay dormant. You don't necessarily have those indicators that something's happening during these types of attacks, depending on what that goal is, as far as how deep that information and knowledge and collection is going into your environment. So what we like to talk about is ways to minimize the effect of it. And to Ramin's point, the goal is money, right? People are trying to commoditize your data. That's the whole purpose. So if you can put protection around the data itself, then even if someone is in your environment, even if someone grabs that data and pulls it out, which is what's usually happening, and then they'll threaten to release it on the dark web unless you pay XYZ. Right. If you have a product like Secure, DRM protection, digital rights management, you're putting the protection on the data itself. That means if someone goes in and grabs an on-prem file share with 10-year-old archive data, takes the whole folder, zips it up, and throws it somewhere else outside of your network. If you have that content protected, you could say, hey, only internal users are going to get certain levels of permissions on this. So if anyone outside the org is trying to access, it's basically like a brick. The possession of the file doesn't mean access or control to the content. So I think tools like DRM protections, data-centric security, put the protections on the data itself, because you know the data has to move. Those are the only solutions that I see to mitigate that part of the ransomware attack, which is that here's the part that really made it worth it. It reminds me of, if you guys, and here I'll date myself, but the steering wheel locks that you would get back in the day. You know, people would complain about, hey, I had to lock this device into my steering wheel so no one steals my car. You know, often people said, listen, you don't even have to lock it. If you just put it there, it's enough of a deterrent to make someone go to the next car, right? Similar with ransomware. If you have that data protected, yes, they could get in the environment, but what can they do? How do they get money out of getting into your environment? So I think that's something that's important to understand as well with these protections, is that you've got to understand, and people in cyber, you know, always are looking at it this way as well. What is the goal? Think like that attacker, understand their drive, and see if you can make it not worth their time as much and not worth that much, you know, going for money. So I think that's one thing that I do feel is pretty big in the field. There's still a lot of concern around ransomware. And I think that this type of technology is uniquely positioned to be able to handle parts of those most common attacks to make them less effective and mitigate some of that risk. But yeah, definitely phishing, definitely II implications, and what that's going to mean to the sophistication and the awareness training that will be necessary, right, to identify these deep fakes and things like that. Those are definitely areas that are top of mind. And those are going to continue to develop, right? The more we innovate, the more the attackers are going to innovate. Technology will help both sides. But if you can put protections on those crown jewels, whatever they may be, you're going to be prepared to at least have a good level of defense and mitigating the risk of that type of attack.
So, yeah. Analogy. Great analogy. Yeah, that's a
and dating. I think a lot of folks may not even get that one, but there was a device that you can lock in the steering wheel of your car.
100%. Another one we love to use as Seclor as well is, you know, you're a threat actor and you break into a bank, right? And you try to get in that vault. Well, it's one thing to break into one vault and all the money's right there, but what if you break into that vault and every single dollar bill has its own vault,
Yeah,
you know, protecting?
on it.
Now you're trying to break into like a million vaults. You don't have time for that, right? We have to learn ways and creative ways of shifting that economic burden. So that's definitely where data-centric security steps in.
Appreciate that.
100%. So, Sherry, I remember we were chatting the other day actually, and you were telling me some insights about quantum threats and how it's reshaping the cybersecurity landscape. I'd love for you to share that with the broader group, because I know you're seeing quite a bit out in the field. What's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate that. So, and being out in the field, I have an opportunity to speak to so many different cybersecurity folks and business folks at a lot of different companies in a lot of different verticals. So we get a lot of good exposure, but I'll tell you, one of the most fun parts of that interaction with, what's going on in the field is definitely going to these events like cybersecurity summits and things like that, where you can have these trade show type or training events that are put on, where you can have groups coming in and giving your presentations about, here's the latest and greatest of what's going on in the industry, and here are some tools that might help you protect it. And it's fun because we see everything from, hey, I'm studying in school, trying to get a degree in IT and in cyber. What are things that I should be aware of? And, people are out there for all different reasons to learn about this industry. And I think it's fun just to see the different questions that come up. And definitely quantum is one. And of course, personally in my professional career, probably 15, 20 years ago, we were talking about this, right? This is not new. Quantum computing, as a theoretical, as a hypothetical, these have been on the radar for a while. The difference is, I think we're now getting to a point where we're seeing it become more of a reality, right? We're seeing this and we're understanding that there are implications. And we want to make sure, as an outside field person, like, hey, I'm hearing that this is still an issue. This is an issue. Are we closer? Are we worried? And I know that Secure is really on top of this as a thought leader in this industry. So, around DRM particularly, but also around looking at this from the quantum perspective. So a lot of the questions that come to me in the field are, should I be worried about this? Number one, because I've heard about it for a long time. It's like, somebody crying wolf, right? Like, is it really a problem or is it not a problem? And the truth is, you can't just push it aside, right? It's not something to just throw in the back of your mind, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, like a lot of folks were doing. It is a real valid thing to talk about. But then the next question is, well, what do I do? And even if I do have something I can do, what can I do and when could I do it? There's a lot of mysticism, I guess, around, and we want to clear that fog for folks. So, Ramin, I'm going to ask you to give some insight in this, because I know out in the field, the questions are there, the curiosity is there, and there's some fear and anxiety there too. So please do share with us what Secure sees, what you personally see as well.
Sure, Sherry. And, I like what you said about the fact that, quantum computing and the discussions around that have been around for a while, right? In fact, some of the papers on quantum computing date back to at least 10 years ago, sometimes longer than that. And some, by the way, came from our own CEO at Secure, a very, very good paper on quantum computing that's almost 10 years old now. So what's happening? Why is it that people are more concerned about it? And what is that concern about? I think let's just start there. One of the major concerns around quantum computing is that with the quantum computing, we could potentially reach a point where the traditional encryption methods that we use today could become vulnerable. And that's a big concern. In fact, I'm going to throw a bunch of different acronyms. There's an acronym called Q-Day that has come up, and Q-Day is the day that quantum computers will have the ability to break current encryption standards. That's something that's bringing a lot of concerns to people. That said, when you talk to a lot of the experts, a lot of the people that are in this field, they estimate that this is still going to be within the next decade. It's not something that is happening today, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't get ready. We definitely have to look at ways that we can prepare for this Q-Day. And I want to talk about some of the things that's happening. In August of last year, August of 2024, National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, they released a standard called FIPS 203. FIPS 203 basically enables companies, organizations to deploy post-quantum cryptography, or PQC. I said I'm going to be throwing a lot of acronyms out. And what this algorithm is basically allowing you to make sure that even after quantum computing comes out and becomes something that is available, that it's not easy or possible to be able to break encryptions if you adhere to this technology. But we all know, really changing and completely moving technology to new technologies takes a long time. And companies are going to have to make sure that that all the technologies that they have today, all the security technologies that they have today, are even ready to be able to adhere and support these new technologies. And we believe that there are a number of steps that you can take to get ready. For example, one of the main things that we believe companies need to do is to make sure that they know where their sensitive and critical content is and who has access to those things. The other thing that is coming up and a lot of concerns around it is this notion of steal now and decrypt later. A lot of customers are asking, they're saying, so what if we do everything that we can do right now? We're using today's encryption. We are making sure that all of our content is DRM. The content that is sensitive or our IP is DRM. But what if some of these bad threat actors, they steal our content, and let's say 5 years or 10 years from now, they use this new quantum technology to be able to decrypt it? So what we tell our customers is to make sure that they categorize their content also based on the data's lifespan. Some of the content are things that are going to be consumed much earlier, much sooner, and they're probably not going to be of much value even a year from now. But some of the content are things that they want to make sure that they continue to keep secure. For that reason, what they want to do is to make sure that whatever technology that they're using have a path to upgrade. And that upgrade is both in terms of making sure that the solution can use some of these new technologies, this post-quantum cryptography, or potentially even allow them to bring in their own algorithms, because algorithms are going to continue to evolve and change. So the acronym BYO, bring your own algorithm, is something to look for. So basically, you're not locked to a single predefined algorithm that is provided by the system, and you also make sure that your investment is future-proof.
So if I'm new to cybersecurity and I need someone to explain quantum computing to me almost as if maybe I was a fifth grader, what's a way that you would explain that, Ramin? Because I have a feeling that some folks they kind of understand, but they need a digestible way of understanding. What would you say?
Yeah, as it applies to what I went through in terms of breaking today's encryption, the way to think about it, Kevin, is imagine current technology taking order of 20 to 25 years to be able to decrypt the content that has been encrypted by today's technologies. With quantum computing, that amount of time could be reduced to as short as days or months, which brings a major risk and concern to people, because with today's encryption, basically it's not possible to be able to decrypt the content, and by the time you do it, that content is most likely useless anyways. But with quantum computing coming and the speeds that they provide, you could potentially decrypt the content in a much shorter time than you can today, and that's a major concern to everyone.
Super helpful. Super helpful. Let's talk about fourth party risk, because most of the time we talk about manufacturing and third parties and how do I make sure that my vendor is not leaking my data on accident and things like that. But we often forget about what about the people working with my vendor that I don't necessarily interact with directly. Those are your fourth parties, right? So talk to me about why do we even care about, protecting the data itself when we're talking about people that we're not even doing business with directly? Why should I care about fourth party risk?
Yeah, like you said, in 2024, we talked a lot about third-party risks. In fact, even 2023, it was a big topic for us, right? Third-party risk, supply chain, and what to do about that. And we talked a lot about making sure that you have sufficient training, make sure that you go through your contracts and understand what's actually in your contracts between you and your supply chain. But now the threat has really expanded. And I'd say in 2025, not only the third-party risks are going to continue to rise, but we also need to expand our attention to look at fourth-party risk. And what is fourth-party risk? Fourth-party risk is about our vendors' own suppliers, the vendors that they're dealing with. And what are we going to be doing about that? Because no matter how strong your perimeter-based security might be, there's always the potential of an attack to your third party that then could potentially leave you exposed. So what are some risks? And let me talk about a few of those risks that exist with fourth-party security. Obviously, data breaches, because they may have weaker security practices. The sub-supplier of your vendor, even though you've made sure that you're working with vendors that really have strong security, you don't know exactly who they're working with potentially, and their sub-supplier could have weaker security practices, and that could potentially cause data breaches. They may have inadequate or poor access controls and also non-compliance. You have to make sure that overall you're compliant to whatever compliances that you have to adhere to, but because of the sub-supplier, you may actually lose your compliance capability. So that's something to keep track of. There may be potential vulnerability because they're using outdated systems. Again, this is the stuff that you might be checking with your direct vendors that you're dealing with, but you need to now look at who they're working with as well. And of course, you don't have a visibility to their security posture. They're basically another step away from you. So it's not an easy thing to deal with. Obviously, it does require a multifaceted approach that really involves everyone. It really requires the vendor's risk management programs. You need to have commercial grade vendor management platforms. You have to really go through your contractual agreements to make sure that it's not just about you and the vendor that you're dealing with, but it also includes fourth party disclosures, who they're working with, who are their vendors that they're connected to. And finally, it comes down to a lot of different things that all have to work together. People training, processes, technologies, and you have to be really thoughtful and make sure that you're really managing your fourth party risks as a whole. Sherry, let me ask you to jump in. Are you hearing from our customers about their concerns around fourth party risks, or generally all supply chain risks?
Definitely. And we're hearing it increasing. So, and I will say a lot of that does also depend on vertical, because once again, not everything needs to be completely protected and locked down. So it really comes down to, what are these workflows? What is the data that is traveling, that is having to be shared with those fourth parties? If it's something that doesn't require PII or intellectual property or something like that, less of a concern. So do you go through a super comprehensive vendor security assessment with every marketing partner that you're going to hire, your partners are going to be hiring? How involved do you have to get? And it really comes down to, what are the crown jewels? What are you having to protect? So I would say this definitely is coming up, because especially in certain verticals, semiconductor, manufacturing, these are really top, because you know that the content that is being shared, let's say you're talking about CAD design files, for example. Seclor is very well positioned, has a very good footprint in manufacturing, whether it's auto manufacturing, whether it's semiconductors, it doesn't matter what area of that. But that particularly, when you're talking about things like design documents that are going to be needed to be fed into printers, or having some engineers work in markup, that content is proprietary and it needs to be protected. So once again, DRM solutions that go close to your data and apply the protection are so important, but let's not protect everything if it doesn't need to be protected, especially when you're dealing with these fourth party, beyond the third party suppliers, because there is more complexity that's going to be involved, right? You don't have your support team talking to the recipients, 3 levels down that are receiving this stuff. So I think that it is something that people are aware of. It's becoming more common because of things like breaches at those third-party suppliers, which now people can realize, hey, wait a minute, we've asked them to fill out this security assessment for our partner, but I don't know if they ask their partners to fill out security assessments to verify. And when is it applicable? When is it necessary? And when isn't? So I think trying to figure out and navigate a mesh diagram, right? Of here's, our data goes here, and then it goes here. And then in these cases, if, somebody's on maternity leave, it might be outsourced to this other fourth party, but it depends on the situation, right? Like, you can't really do that. So again, I think the concern is definitely in the field. I would say the solution is still the same. Protect the data as close to the data as possible, to make sure that it stays protected. And I think that is the way and the only way. The other thing that I'll say that's kind of interesting when you're looking at a data protection solution that allows you auditing abilities, audit and tracking, which is what DRM will do, because you get an audit trail whenever someone's working on content that is protected. You can see who's trying to access it, what they're trying to do, whether they're allowed or not allowed, those types of things. That can be very, very helpful to also map out who are those fourth party suppliers. Because once you have content that are your crown jewels and it's protected, you want visibility into where it's going and who's trying to do what on it. So again, not just from the, hey, we can check the box so our shareholders can rest assured that our intellectual property is protected, but also we can learn about how our third-party partners are handling our data by seeing who they're giving it to and what they're trying to do with it. So it allows a lot more training opportunities, maybe revisit those contracts, as you mentioned, Ramin, know the contracts, but it even gives you a feedback loop, right? You can not just know it, but you now can go back and verify that whole trust but verify, because you can see and be visible to what activities are happening. And when we're talking about fourth party, work going on, that is your only visibility, because you don't know, you don't have a way of knowing or verifying otherwise where that data is actually going. So I think that's a really important part, again, of data-centric security, because we all know, especially in today's society, and I love this, that the data will travel. Gone are the days of a DLP block if you try to leave the perimeter, right? It used to be that you would just say, hey, and unfortunately, I shouldn't say used to be. Today, there are still a lot of cases of this, but we want to get away from that, where, hey, this should go out. It has sensitive info. We correctly identified it, a DLP tool, a scanning tool, whatever it was, but we can't block it. The business needs it to travel. So they're going to ask for an exception from the security department. So now we've got to manage, thousands of exceptions that are out there on our security tools. We don't have ways of following up and saying, hey, can we now protect or do, but these exception lists grow and grow. And so I think this is really a great time to address those types of scenarios where we know the data needs to travel. Let's not frame security. No longer is it stopping the business, right? Security is now. We all know that it's scary out there. If you open up O365 Teams to outside sharing, it scares security professionals. It's the wild, wild west, right? Everything could just go leave. But if you do it in a way that's secure, you can enable the business instead of blocking. So security now becomes business enablement. And I think that is very important as well, is that the more culturally our user populations understand the breaches, the risks, the impact it has, both personally as a consumer with their own private data that's out there, but also as an employee of an organization that handles it. The more we see that kind of cultural change, the easier and better these tools can be adopted, and the more success you can have on those types of adoptions. So again, I think, looking at data-centric security, particular DRM, in my opinion, is really about enabling the business to be able to let the data move as we know it needs to and will continue to need to, instead of having the security team have to be the deny rubber stampers that say, nope, can't go out, right? Doesn't work. You can't make money if the business can't do its job. So I think that's a really important part as well with DRM in general, especially around fourth party risk.
100%.
Yeah, can agree with you more. And in case you still don't believe how big the risks are, I'd like to point out the recent U.S. Treasury major incident, which was a Chinese hack that happened not too long ago. So even at the government level, this stuff is pretty serious.
Absolutely, 100%. Let's open it up for some questions. Thank you guys for being here. We want to make sure that we get, we're on time and everything and respecting your time. So let's maybe do 2 or 3 questions. Yeah. Okay. So first question I have here, I can block copy and paste to AI chat applications only, even the ones integrated with Microsoft apps as well.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in and answer this one, and Sherry jump in and add if I miss something. One of the inherent capabilities that you have with Seclor is to set specific rights on a document, to be able to specify which documents the recipient has the ability to be able to do a copy and paste to. And that doesn't have anything to do with any specific AIs. You can set that right on the document. This could be your standard applications like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on, and either allow or disallow the ability to be able to do copy and paste. So that's quite important capability that we already have and we've had for quite a long time. But in addition to that, and I'd like to shed this light on what else can be done with AI, one of the things that happens with AI is that you're definitely going to be opening a document and editing it. And while you're going through the edit of a document, you're in essence allowing AIs to be able to go through your document as well. And let's say you're using Microsoft applications and you have Copilot enabled in your infrastructure, and Copilot has the ability to go through your documents. And we talked about the fact that it's not just the AI LLMs themselves, but the bad actors could actually use other ways to be able to go and extract data from those AIs as well. So what do you do about Copilot as you're editing the document? We're actually bringing technology to set specific rights to the document specifically for Copilot. So in essence, controlling Copilot and disallowing it from being able to go through sensitive documents. This is a technology that's going to be coming out from Seclo fairly soon. We're going to look at expanding that to other AI technologies as well. So it's not just limited to Copilot, but this is specifically while the document is not encrypted. It is actually during the edit of the document.
That's fantastic, Ramin, insight. And that's what I would say I see in the field is with, particularly with AI, there's a couple major concerns. One being, what is AI doing from an indexing perspective in my content, right? I don't want my CAD design docs to be somehow entered in or scanned through or anything like that, because we don't want there to be an index or a list of sensitive information that shouldn't be there, because we won't even know it's there and we won't have a way of protecting it. So that's one very big one. And then the next is, as you had mentioned toward, early in the call, one of our first topics talking about AI, that there's so much AI can bring and will bring. We have folks looking at how can I implement AI in my organization to automate workflows and processes and make people more productive, right? Whether that's a developer looking for a shortcut, right, or some easy way to do that work, or someone who's saying, hey, I want to know everything that's out around this subject in our environment. It's a scary, scary moment, especially for CISOs being in these positions, knowing that this is out there and we don't really know if we have the appropriate controls and configuration. And what do we do when employee one goes and copies something sensitive, pastes it into a ChatGPT or a tool like that with the best of intention, not realizing that they've added something into the public domain that now exists in the public domain that shouldn't. And I think that is once again a very scary moment and a very eye-opening moment. And we know that it's here. It's not that it's coming, it's already here. So Seclore's ability to prevent just that one thing, that copy paste, honestly has driven more conversations in these types of events to bring us to someone that wants to actually learn more about our technology than probably anything else, that and email security. But I would say the AI copy paste is such an important concern, and it's out there. So and even I'll also, if you'll indulge me just for a moment, I like to use the analogy of a game of whack-a-mole when I talk about DLP policies. So if once again I'm dating myself, here's dating myself number 2 in this call. If you guys remember going to arcades and you had the little game where the moles would pop up, you had a big foam hammer and you whack it as soon as they pull up. That's how I look at security policies and posture today. We don't have a choice, right? You have to put DLP policies or CASP policies in to say, what is, let's go ahead and prevent someone from loading to Dropbox or Box or these other sites. We have to put in policies to restrict what's going out outside of our corporate boundary. The problem is, what is the next Dropbox or Box? You're always reacting, right? You're playing whack-a-mole. You're saying something else just popped up. Oh, wait, I got to hurry up and update all these policies so that I can make sure we're stopping it or mitigating it somehow. If you take the data-centric security approach, you've got a lot less pressure on winning that game of whack-a-mole. And I think it's very similar with whether you're talking about DLP policies or whether you're talking about controls like AI. It's the same discussion, which is, what is the next ChatGPT? Even if you have a way of blocking ChatGPT in your environment, what about the 4 others that are popping up or wherever it may be in the next year or 2? So you're always going to be behind the scenes on those reactionary policies to try to control what people can and can't do where. So I think that having that data-centric security approach, again, is the only way to mitigate that part of the risk, which is, if you've already got it protected, doesn't matter if it lands on a USB drive, if it lands on a Dropbox, if it lands on someone's personal computer, because possession doesn't mean control. So I think that's an important message as well, both with ChatGPT and AI, as well as DLP, CASB policies and things like that around security controls.
Couldn't have said it better. 100%. Absolutely. Hopefully that answered that question. Let's do one more question. With the advent of quantum computing and AI, what is your take on password manager with regards to identity and access management?
Maybe I'll jump in, and Sherry again, jump in and please add to it. That is definitely one of the concerns, and it's not just password managers; it's also other technologies that we use. Let's give an example of one. DNS, for example. DNS holds a lot of data, and today we feel pretty safe that we can go to a DNS and get the right information about which website we're going to. But imagine now being able to break the encryption and actually attack DNSs and basically change the routes and potentially take people to the wrong places. So a lot of different technologies that are used today could potentially be threatened, which is why there is a threat. There is a threat, and it is something that we need to start getting ready for. And it is something that comes from the preparation, comes from some of the things that I talked about knowing what the risks are and making sure that the tools, the technologies that we're using today are upgradable and have the ability to potentially support different encryption technologies.
And I'll add just a little bit. Thank you, Ramin, for that. I'll add just a little bit to that and say, yeah, specifically around passwords, it's great from a user perspective and a security on awareness training for the user population to have these tools that can, manage passwords, things like that. However, I will say it's great to see the federation. So we're seeing, you no longer have to write down a list of 15 different passwords for different applications that you have to rotate every 90 days, right? So we don't have the post-it on the monitor risk as badly as we used to because of that. But to Ramin's point, we're putting an awful lot of trust into that system of record at that point, because now it's not just a breach. If something were to happen with that, it's not only impacting one application or one place, right? Because we've now got that used everywhere. So I'll say that, again, the importance of knowing the system of record, whether it's DNS, whether it's certificate authorities, whether it's password management and identity management, we just have to be very comfortable with that system of record and the system behind it. And I think it's great from a user experience perspective, but it does make us just make sure we're having less places maybe that we have to hone in on what is the overall security around that system. So yeah, great questions.
Definitely. Definitely. Folks, if you have more additional questions, feel free to reach out to us directly. I went ahead and included our website and email address for you. Our team would be more than happy to be in touch. And I did see a couple folks reaching out for some demos. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. Really hopeful that this was valuable. The information was definitely valuable, and I learned some new things myself. So Ramin and Sherry, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be